Nigeria crosses a COVID-19 milestone, recording the highest number of daily coronavirus cases ever. Federal government denies approving hike in electricity tariff. In international news, U.S. Democrats sweep the two Senate runoff elections in Georgia, taking over control of the upper chamber. And later, sport. Uruguay players want Edison Cavani's punishment overturned.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Nigeria has set a new record in the daily numbers of COVID-19 infections. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control and CDC confirms 1,354 new cases on Tuesday. The highest number ever recorded before Tuesday was on Monday, when 1,204 cases were reported. This confirms the rising numbers of infections across the country. And CDC says 697 recoveries were recorded, including 324 community recoveries in Lagos State and 137 of the same in the Federal Capital Territory. One new coronavirus-related death was recorded across the country. Lagos, among the 20 states that recorded cases on Tuesday, had 712 of the new infections. The FCT reported 145. The nation's total number of COVID-19 cases now stand at 92,705, while 1,319 Nigerians have died from the virus. Minister of State for Health, Dr. Olorunibe Mamura, has called out Nigerians who are still denying the existence of COVID-19. At Tuesday's briefing by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Mamura said the denial that the disease exists make a mockery of those who have lost their lives to the disease. He also said such attitude is, quote, an eloquent disservice to frontline health workers whose brows continue to get beaten and bruised, end quote. Mamura called on citizens to take primary responsibility for their health as individuals. He disclosed that the federal government is working hard to make oxygen available on a short-term basis through collaboration with a private sector coalition against COVID-19, COVID. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, currently on a five-nation African visit, met with President Muhammadu Buhari and also with Foreign Affairs Minister Geoffrey Yama in Abuja. The visit culminated in the signing of 7 bilateral consensuses. Correspondent Phil Hazard reports.
It's been a busy day for the Chinese foreign minister. He's visited Nigeria, where he also had a long discussion with his counterpart, the Nigerian foreign minister, Geoffrey Onyema, where they discussed quite a number of issues relating to trade and commerce, health, and of course infrastructural development. The Chinese foreign minister also pledged to help Nigeria gain access to vaccines and also boost the health sector until COVID is over. He also promised to improve the infrastructural development, some of the projects that are ongoing, to see how more Chinese companies can come into the country and invest. The Nigerian Foreign Minister Geoffrey Onyema also stated that the Chinese government has pledged to donate 100 million Chinese yuan, that's about $16 million, also to boost the country's economy. The Chinese Foreign Minister will be making his next stop at the Democratic Republic of the Congo, that's around the Central African region, also at the eastern part of the continent, and he'll be visiting Tanzania next, and that's in East Africa, and then to Botswana in South Africa, and lastly he will be making a stop at the island of Seychelles to wrap up his 5 African nation tour, which has actually been the tradition for the past 30 years, where Chinese government officials visit Africa as their first stop at the beginning of every year.
The federal government has denied approving a 50% electricity tariff hike, as contained in reports making news rounds and being carried on social media. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, said in a statement on Tuesday the reports were untrue and were misinforming electricity consumers. The Commission said rates are frozen and subsidized for customers on service bands D and F, who are served fewer than 12 hours of electricity supply per day, on average over a period of 1 month. The Commission further explained that some service bands saw a hike in their rates after adjustments per kilowatt hour that reflected partial impact of inflation and the movements in foreign exchange. The House of Representatives says synergy among the nation's security operatives would help curb rising insecurity in the country. Representative Abbas Adigun tabled a motion in the House on the need to address the lack of synergy and unhealthy rivalry among security agencies in the country. The motion was later debated and passed before lawmakers proceeded on its holiday break. Representative Adigun said 2 decades of violent clashes among security operatives, especially between Nigerian Army and Nigeria Police Force personnel. He says such interagency feuds have caused perpetual threats and insecurity in the country. The motion, which urged the federal government to put necessary machinery in place to ensure collaboration among security agencies in the country, was supported by Chairman of the House Committee on the Army, Representative Abdulrazak Namdes.
Coming up, African stories. Zimbabwe back under lockdown as COVID-19 cases surge. And later, international stories. U.S. Democrats sweep the 2 Senate runoff elections in Georgia, taking over control of the upper chamber.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Zimbabwe is back under lockdown as it faces rising COVID-19 cases. The government says this is necessary to keep the runaway pandemic in check. Correspondent Faraya Uwakutuya reports from Harare.
Before the festive season, cases had been steadily rising, but an almost doubling of new infections between November and December has brought matters to a head. A level 4 lockdown, during which only essential services such as medical, supermarket, mining house and farm workers are allowed to report for duty, begins on January 5th.
Your main issue and how you must think about it and what most likely informed that decision is that all our COVID admission facilities were almost 100% full. What that means is when the number of new patients were almost doubling every 24 hours, you're going to have a situation where you have 100 people who need admission in one night and they have nowhere to go.
But even amidst surging cases, hundreds of people still ignored social distancing guidelines at this bank queue. It's the sort of complacency that authorities say is propelling the rate of new infections upwards and which they would like to see clamped down on during this lockdown. Given the adverse impact the first lockdown in April 2020 had on livelihoods, there are mixed feelings about the latest restrictions.
Most of the people may be unhappy because the lockdown will affect their income. But this is the only way we can save lives.
30 days is too long. We should have a lockdown for 14 days, like in South Africa, and be allowed to work under strict regulations.
We will struggle to buy food for the rest of this month because we spent all our money during the festive season. If the government wants us to stay at home, it should assist with food handouts.
While the government lacks the resources to help all those who will be hardest hit economically, it's being urged to also cater for those that will be affected physically.
One of the things we have to really do in these 30 days is to increase the admission capacity, increase the amount of oxygen, the supplies, so that when we do reopen, it's going to be obviously a phased reopening, but then we have increased capacity.
Zimbabwe's response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been hampered by a shortage of ICU facilities, personal protective equipment, and an industrial action by doctors and nurses.
South Africa surely needed some respite from all the horrible pandemic stories that have dogged it for some time now. So economists threw in a cherry report that the country's business confidence rose to a 2-year high in fourth quarter of 2020. Correspondent Sumitra Undu reports.
Business in South Africa slowly getting back on track. Whilst the hard lockdown was necessary, it battered the economy. But according to the latest RMB Business Confidence Index, there's some upside.
I think it was expected that some sectors of business would begin to ramp up, and that's what's happened. But I think we need to appreciate that that ramp up is from a significant drop in the previous quarter. What we've seen in the last quarter is that the opening up of the economy in the last couple of months after going down to lockdown level 1 has had a beneficial impact on economic growth.
All sub-indexes in business confidence rose, albeit off a low base. There are concerns, though, that a second wave of COVID-19 currently sweeping across the country will impact business again.
I think we're certainly probably past the worst because I don't imagine that we would go back to a hard lockdown like we saw at level 5 that crippled many businesses' opportunity to actually operate. I think where we're not past the worst is particularly structurally reconfiguring the economy to be able to grow sustainably. We've got to make sure that we remove those structural impediments.
The president addressed South Africans Monday night announcing tighter restrictions to curb the spread, but was careful not to limit business too much.
We've seen in Europe, as we continue to see in America, the virus hasn't gone away. In fact, the virus is even stronger in the second wave, and we're beginning to see that in South Africa. We have certainly said publicly that we don't think if a move from lockdown level 1 to stronger lockdowns is appropriate. We don't think that's going to actually assist in curbing the growth of and the spread of the virus, and it will have a detrimental impact on the economy.
The Business Confidence Index jumped to 40 from 24. It's a significant rise, but one that comes on the back of eased lockdown regulations. South Africa still has a long way to go before strong economic activity returns and the business environment is more conducive for entrepreneurs.
At least 22 persons have been reported killed in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo village during an overnight raid. Local authorities said on Tuesday the militants struck late on Monday, killing residents of Wenda village with machetes and guns. The administrator of Beni territory, Donat Kibwana, confirmed the death toll and said the Allied Democratic Forces, a Ugandan Islamist group, was responsible. ADF has emerged as the most lethal militias in DR Congo's eastern borderlands and is suspected of hacking to death at least 17 persons in a nearby village last week. The eastern part of DRC has been plagued by Islamist rebel attacks. Kibwana said 9 more bodies were discovered on Monday in another village in the area, also victims of an alleged ADF attack. He added, quote, "Now we live in total fear with no certainty about the future," end quote. UN figures show more than 1,000 civilians were killed in attacks attributed to the ADF in 2019 and 2020, despite repeated offensives by the army and UN peacekeepers against the group over the past decade.
When we return, international news. U.S. Democrats sweep the 2 Senate runoff elections in Georgia, taking over control of the upper chamber. And later, sport. Uruguay players want Edison Cavani's punishment overturned.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. History is being made in Georgia today, where Democrats have won the 2 runoff U.S. Senate seats in that state that would tilt the balance of power in the upper chamber. Reverend Raphael Warnock will be the first black senator ever from the state of Georgia. He is senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has pastored. The other Democrat, John Ossoff, defeated incumbent Republican Senator David Perdue, making him the youngest senator-elect in the country since Joe Biden was elected in 1978. With these wins, the Democrats will wrest control of the Senate from the Republicans. They already have the majority in the House and would have the executive branch as well when Joe Biden is inaugurated as president on January the 20th. Taking control of the Senate paves the way for Joe Biden to put in place his agenda once he becomes president. 3 million Georgians had voted early or by mail, including more than 120,000 new voters who did not participate in the general election last November. An additional 1 million voters showed up at the polls on Tuesday. Warnock is the first Georgia Democrat elected to the Senate in 20 years. United States leading health experts are dismissing suggestions that the second shot of authorized coronavirus vaccines could be delayed to make more doses available faster to more people. Recently, some public health experts have debated whether it is safe to reduce the 2-dose regimen that proved highly effective in trials to at least 1 shot as the pandemic surges. The debate continues as the United States struggles with administering the doses it already has. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention data show more than 50 million vaccine doses have been distributed, but only about 4.5 million have been administered. But the Food and Drug Administration says it would be premature to change the way the 2 authorized vaccines are administered. Meanwhile, the statement by FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn and Director of the agency's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, Peter Marks, said the available data continue to support the use of 2 specified doses of each authorized vaccine at specified intervals. European nations are not joking around with the second wave of the pandemic, which appears to be deadlier than the first wave. As a result, many of these countries have kicked off 2021 with lockdowns. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has thrust his country into a strict new national lockdown to last for at least 6 weeks. People in England are allowed to leave their homes only for limited reasons like shopping for essentials, exercise, and medical assistance. Elsewhere in Europe, Italy's government has announced an extension of the coronavirus restrictions imposed in the country during the Christmas break until mid-January. Italians will be allowed to visit friends only once a day in meetings capped at a maximum of 2 adults. A new government decree also indicates travel between regions will be forbidden except for health or work reasons. Restrictions have also been imposed on the hospitality industry, where bars and restaurants only permitted to provide takeaway services. Germany, too, has announced an extension of lockdown restrictions as the country's disease control center reported 944 more COVID-19 deaths. Germany's latest lockdown measure took effect last December after a partial shutdown starting in early November set to initially expire next Sunday failed to reduce the number of daily new coronavirus infections. A top government meeting was held on Tuesday to decide for how long the lockdown should go on or to what extent schools will reopen. Vaccinations in Germany and the rest of the 27-nation European Union started more than a week ago. Germany has reported 35,518 virus-related deaths overall. Brazil, Latin America's biggest country with 212 million people, has the second highest death toll after the United States, with more than 173,000 persons killed by the pandemic that has also battered the economy. The government says it can only afford economic aid, but citizens say they need it badly. Correspondent Lucrecia Franco has the details.
Since April, Erickson, Manuela and Gabriel Silva, their 5-year-old son, have been putting food on the table thanks to monthly government relief payments dubbed Corona vouchers. But with the end of the year on December 31st came an abrupt end to the aid program. The Silvas live in a humble house in Providencia, one of Rio de Janeiro's favelas or slums, where nearly everyone had been receiving the emergency funds.
Our earnings ended when my husband lost his job and we were left with nothing to eat. I don't know what we will do. We're both unemployed.
Both husband and wife had each been receiving the equivalent of $115 per month, which was halved in December to around $58. The emergency aid was the main source of income for 68 million Brazilians in 2020. But without the handouts, economists say, many will be thrown back into poverty. Economist Marcelo Neri, author of a study on the effects of the program, says the payments made a real difference and he's braced for a backslide.
The poverty fell from 11 in 2019 to 4.5 if you get the lowest in August 2020. And our forecast, it will reach something like 12% in 2021. So we are very concerned of what's going to happen now in these first days of 2021.
The Silvas are among those who doubt they will be able to find jobs and are worried not only about how to survive, but what to do if they get sick.
If it depended on me, I would remain isolated at home because I'm worried to infect my family, but we will need to earn some money.
But the government says it spent some $62 billion on the relief program and it can't afford to add any more to the national debt, leaving the Silva's future looking as uncertain as the country's economy.
Up next, sport. Uruguay players want Edison Cavani's punishment overturned. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Mukago. Welcome back. This is ANN News and Sport. Uruguay's player union has called on the Football Association to overturn striker Edison Cavani's 3-match ban. The Manchester United striker was fined 100,000 euros and banned for an Instagram post containing a Spanish word that has been found offensive. Luis Suarez and Diego Godin have both shared statements by their National Players Union that calls the punishment discriminatory. Uruguay's Football Association also wants the ban reviewed. Professional and amateur players from the South American country described the FA's sanctioning of Cavani as an act against the culture and way of life of the Uruguayan people. Premier League football games will continue despite new stringent lockdown restrictions in England. Elite sport, however, will be allowed to continue despite the introduction of these measures. The Premier League was paused for 3 months in March when a lockdown was announced. Given elite sports exemptions, international transfers, including players travelling to complete moves in the UK, will also remain unaffected. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.